Does BYU have a legitimate shot at the college football playoff this year? I know it sounds crazy, and you're going to say, no, because they're not in the SEC and their last name's not Bama.
You're drinking the blue Kool-Aid.
Yeah, if their first name's not Alla and their last name's not Bama, they're not getting in.
Yeah.
I saw that conversation yesterday on television, which I thought was funny. But does BYU have a legitimate shot at the college football playoff, Jake? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you always have a chance, and I think that BYU, it has to do more than other teams probably have to do to get there because of their situation. But I think overall, yeah, BYU has a path, and I think that it literally all hinges, in my opinion, on Jaren Hall's ability to stay healthy. Because if he's healthy and he's playing well, and they don't have to deal with who's going to come in behind him to back him up, like how are we going to survive this week against some random school? If you don't have to deal with that dynamic for most of the season, you're going to be in a really great place. So, yeah, I mean, I do think that there is a path to the college football playoff for BYU, but I think that, the conversation really is more around what they would have to do. And to me, I think the bare minimum is being a one-loss team. But I also think this conversation about, being cold-blooded about how you beat teams. We all remember the infamous conversation we had on this show. Go and find it. That's the greatness of YouTube, where we talked about, hey, you didn't handle Idaho State. I think they beat that team by 10 or 10, maybe 20 points, whatever it was. Not a lot.
By not enough.
Yeah, and it's like, hey, man, you got to bury these teams by like 40 points. You got to flex on these teams. You got to show, like, hey, we are a legitimate powerhouse program, and we need to do that. Like if you're a powerhouse program, you beat Idaho State by 40. You beat, Poughkeepsie International by 50. Like, all these random schools. Yes, all these random-ass schools that BYU plays, you need to go out and make a point with those.
Yeah, and I think the hard part of your BYU is you just have very little room for error, and I think that's one of the pitfalls I think that you have with this year being your final year as an independent. Everybody's looking forward to, going into the Big 12, and everybody's looking forward to, having access to a conference championship game again and all of that stuff. But you also have a large swath of your roster that's never going to see a Big 12 patch on their uniform, that's never going to have access to a Big 12 game. And you have to remember that those kids have everything to play for this year. And, oh, by the way, you also want to play in a big New Year's 6 game. I think you also want to play in the highest profile bowl game you can. And you certainly would like to play on New Year's Day instead of in the Hawaii Bowl. Right? I mean, with all due respect to the Hawaii Bowl, I mean, that's not a game that you're aiming for in August. And so I think if you're BYU, yeah, obviously you have to stay healthy, but this team's got to be able to stop their opponents. This team, defensively, Kalani's club was not nearly as effective defensively last year as they should have been. Health aside, everybody has injuries. This team's got to demonstrate that it's added depth to its roster, that you're not just 2 deep, that you're 3 or 4 deep, and this secondary's got to play better. If BYU wants to win more games, and if BYU wants to play in a significant bowl game of consequence, they've got to cover people, and that's one of the things that they were unable to do last year. I think it goes without saying that you have to have a healthy Jaren Hall. He cannot be diving for an extra yard in the red zone. He cannot be going off on long runs and creating contact instead of stepping out of bounds. Like, those are just not things that starting quarterbacks, that guys who aspire to play in the NFL, that guys that want to play on Sunday instead of Saturday, you're not out looking for contact. You're not out as a headhunter as a quarterback. You are out to live for the next down. And Jaren Hall's got to have that mentality, because I just don't see a path to a New Year's 6 Bowl or a significant postseason appearance, Jake, without a healthy Jaren Hall for the entire season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when you start to look at the schedule and you look at the kind of the roadmap that you're going to have to follow to make this happen, obviously you open, with USF, then you've got Baylor, then you've got Oregon. Those 3 games right there are going to set the tone for your season. I think if you can come out and make a point with Baylor, being that you lost that game last year and Jaren was essentially unwilling to run the football, and Baylor knew that, and you could see it. Like, I think that if you can beat Baylor, that's going to be a big deal for Jaren Hall's confidence. I look at Oregon; they're going to be good. That's going to be a primetime game on Fox. Like, that's going to be really important. But these other games that I want to point out, like your Wyomings on September 24th, your Liberties, your East Carolinas, your Utah Techs, dude, those need to be like I'm not even kidding, like 30, maybe even 40-point spreads. Like, you need to be pounding those teams if you hope to get into the college football playoff. Because I agree with you. I don't think, a one-loss BYU team is good enough just on merit. It's one loss plus saying, hey, we're in the news cycle literally every single week for what we're doing to these teams.
Well, and I also think you have to remember offensively that you're losing a guy in Tyler Algier who was a historic performer for this football team. And obviously your win in recruiting with Chris Brooks coming to you when you beat out Notre Dame to Christopher Brooks. Like, he had every intention of going somewhere else, not named Provo, Utah, and he winds up wearing a BYU helmet. And I think that's absolutely huge for your program. But I think one of the other questions you have to ask yourself is, how healthy is this offensive line going to be? Because I think that's also been a huge problem. Harris LaChance has to play as many reps as he can possibly play this year because he's that effective when he's in the lineup. And I think if you can get health up front, if you can get some semblance of a running game, anything that you're going to be able to do consistently running the football is going to make you a better football team. And it's going to make Jaren Hall a better quarterback, because I still maintain that the wide receiver room has plenty of weaponry. It has plenty of talent, plenty of speed. You have plenty of talent at tight end. You have every reason, if you can run the football and if you can keep a consistent core group of 7 offensive linemen who are locked and ready to go every single week, if you can have that, there's no reason that this team can't be a 1 or 2 loss team. With this schedule, you're not running the table. I mean, overwhelmingly, the odds are 1 to 2% maybe that BYU would go undefeated this year. Mm-hmm. Your schedule is just too difficult. So as you go through this year, I think if you're looking at BYU through an unbiased lens, I think you have to believe that this is a 1 or 2 loss team. And if everything breaks absolutely right, you could be a 1-loss BYU team, which puts you in position for a NY6 Bowl. Unless you don't lose through the entire season, BYU does not have an opportunity to go to the college football playoff. There's just too much, in my opinion, there's too much at the top of the college football world, Jake, to believe that BYU, can go. So I guess I'm asking you, what's the best possible outcome for BYU in 2022?
Yeah, I think the best possible outcome is a NY6 Bowl, just like it was last year. I think that was really disappointing not to get to that level and to be having a conversation around like, hey, this is the bowl we're getting instead of that one. We faltered here and that really limited us. Like, that's what I think the program is looking at for this year. But I think that the college football playoff thing is real once you're in the Big 12. I think that once you're in the Big 12, once you have that, hey, win your conference and you're in the conversation dynamic at play with BYU, I just don't think there's any reason why they shouldn't be treated just like anybody else who would be a threat to at least get in. And especially with college football playoff expansion coming in a couple of years, then obviously that really helps BYU. So that's why I say, like, we can go up and down the schedule and pick out the weak teams and what they should do, but really it's just going to be a matter of decision-making. Is Jaren Hall going to stay healthy? Are they going to be able to replace Algier in the running game, because he did things that really nobody else has done? But really, when you start looking at that, what allowed Tyler to do that? Well, it was that offensive line. That's what allowed Tyler to do that. So with that being the case, is the offensive line going to perform? And can they stay healthy? And if you have a healthy offensive line and you have a healthy back and you have a healthy Jaren Hall, you really, there's just no reason why you shouldn't be a one-loss team this year. I just firmly believe that.
Well, and I think Malik Moore is going to have a lot to do with that as well. I'm just going to go back to the secondary. This team's got to cover. And you're going to see a lot of speed. You're going to see a lot of athletes on this schedule. They've got to cover. But I would agree. I just don't know. Listening to you read that schedule the other day and just thinking through it, like, if you look at what BYU is going to run into this year, there's an enormous amount of talent on the field.
I mean, again, you open with South Florida, then you got Baylor, Oregon, then you've got Wyoming, then you're Utah State, then you're the Shamrock Series in Vegas with Notre Dame, then you've got Arkansas, so Notre Dame, Arkansas back-to-back, that's a tough swing. Then you get a little bit easier in Liberty in East Carolina, then you get Boise State, then you got Utah Tech, and you finish with Stanford. I mean, it's not a cake schedule by any stretch of the imagination, but at the same time, I think if your key pieces are, when you get to October, 28th against East Carolina, if your key pieces are healthy, you should be able to handle that team. If you get to,
if your key pieces are healthy when you get to East Carolina, if you're healthy when you get there, I just think that you're in a position where there's no reason you can't have that. I just think that Oregon game.
But I also think, on the other side, just being realistic, let's say that Jaren does get hurt. Let's say that does happen. Then all of a sudden I look at this schedule and I'm like, all right, well, if Conover doesn't live up to it, yeah, you're probably losing Baylor. You're probably losing Oregon. I don't like your chances against Notre Dame without Jaren Hall. So there's a lot riding on him.
You're going to know who you are the first month of the season. I mean, I think that much is very clear. September is an absolute meat grinder. And, you roll into October with Notre Dame sitting there. This is just a very difficult ask out of this particular football team. I mean, you would have to agree that Siri agrees with that.
Yeah.
And I just think it's one of those things. Hey, Harpreet Bopple says, "Sup, boys, you guys do a great job. I try to listen to the show every day. The show is 100 times better than those ED casuals on the zone. Keep up the great work." Appreciate you, Harpreet. Yeah, the one thing we can promise you is that you won't get dick pill commercials on this show.
Hey, guys.
You will not get ED wave penetration.
Now, later in the show today, you're going to get some quote professional advice on ayahuasca usage.
Well,
so maybe there's that.
And according to the professional advisor we're going to hear from, those may be ED supplements.
Cocaine is a hell of a drug.
I am just furious. No, don't get me started. See, Harpreet, why would you do that? It's your fault. Anyway, you're watching the Monty Show live and local, the Truth in Salt Lake Sports Radio talk, streaming stuff every single morning.
Talk.
And not radio talk. We talk about radio in this town far too often, I would guess. But talking college football right now and looking at who's got a realistic seat at the table for the college football playoff. And I don't think there is any question that one of the big questions in the Pac-12, beyond the fact, will this league exist 2 years from now?
Which I think is a serious question, bro.
Well, obviously, if you miss Bob Thompson on the show, we're tremendously overblowing that situation. Bob Thompson, the former president of Fox Sports Network, straight up said yesterday that with or without UCLA, the Pac-12 has a path to existence, that they can easily survive without UCLA. It's just a matter of what. But I don't know what that looks like. Are you a Power 5 conference without Southern California? I don't know. But the expectations that are being put on Utah, I think, are incredibly high at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of expectations. And I think looking at the comment section on BYU, you see Eric and Raleigh saying that BYU's going 8-4 this year. They certainly could lose 4 games. There's no
doubt about that. That's definitely a possibility. And that's why I say, not to be repetitive, running down the schedule, but I do think, the way the schedule works and the way you're going to have to, go through this thing, yeah, there's a real possibility of that. Because I could see, I could see, okay, you win in Tampa against South Florida to start the year. I would expect that. Frankly, I would. It'll be a tough game, but I would expect a win there. But then I could see Baylor, Oregon. I could see you sustaining some injuries in those 2 games that are gonna make it a lot harder to beat Wyoming and Utah State handily. I could see that. So you look at that and you say, okay, win September 3rd to start the year. Lost September 10th against Baylor. Lost September 17th against Oregon. Okay, you're 1-2 heading back home to Provo to play Wyoming. Even if you're injured, I'm taking BYU over Wyoming. So now you're a 500 ball club heading into Utah State at home. Utah State at home is a win, but I can tell you that's a very physical game. Utah State always brings it. So let's say you go 3-2 heading into October, heading into Notre Dame. Can you get healthy for Notre Dame? If you're healthy for Notre Dame, let's say you win that game somehow.
Well,
right?
I don't. There's no such thing as getting healthy for Notre Dame.
Well,
if you're banged up going into Notre Dame,
but if Baylor gets hurt against Baylor and has 3 weeks to get ready for Notre Dame, then what do you think your chances are?
I mean,
you know what I mean?
If you have guys getting injured, and I mean that Baylor game's at home.
Yep.
You should be healthy coming out of Baylor. I mean, you're deep enough that you should be healthy. If Jaren's healthy, I mean, the offensive line, I mean, if we're being honest, your issues are going to be linebacker and offensive line health. Those two things and development in the secondary. Those two things are likely the biggest deal. But to Eric's point on 8-4, I don't see 4 losses on the schedule. I don't. I think you're going to win that Baylor game. I think Provo is a very difficult place to come and play. BYU's going to have revenge on their mind. There is no question about that. And if you listen to and look at and just, how should I say this delicately? If you peruse Jaren Hall up and down with your eyes, he looks like a quarterback who's ready to play. He looks like a guy who's built his body. That was probably too much. That's an honor code violation. But anyway, the point is, Jaren Hall looks like a guy who's built his body. He's worked really hard. So to Eric and Raleigh's point, I don't see 4 losses on this schedule. I mean, obviously Arkansas is not a game that you're just going to throw out, nor is Notre Dame, nor is Oregon, nor is Baylor. They're going to win 2 of those games. They are going to win 2 of those games, and I think those are 2 of the games that they're going to lose. By the way, Utah State is not going to be a walk in the park. That's a team that's going to bring some talent to the yard. And as BYU knows, that is oftentimes one of the games that's a trap game, a pitfall. But again, remember, that game is a Thursday game, I want to say, at home in Provo. So, I mean, that's going to be a game that you should win.
It is a Thursday game.
That's a Thursday game. And then, I mean, you have to beat Stanford at Stanford. That last game of the year is going to be another one of those games. And this is why I say, see what I did? This is why. This is why I say that when I look at BYU and I get to that November 12th bye week game, that's very difficult. To not have a week off and to run the table through November 12th with this schedule is asking an awful lot. It's asking an awful lot. And I think you're a 1 or 2 loss team, and that Stanford game is likely going to write a large part of the script on your season. And that's why I say I think you're a 1 or 2 loss team and potentially 3 at Stanford.
So to answer the question, can they get to the college football playoff this year? Probably not. Probably not. I mean, being realistic.
Neville93 says good morning. Kurt Myers says morning. What's up, Kurt? Eric and Raleigh says, he also said you're late to your own show, Casuals. We were right on time today.
We weren't late.
We are always on time. Cody Strickland says good morning. Kenai Johnson says top of the morning. M. Alvarez says good morning. It is what it is.